Imagine this. Your thoughts, your beliefs, your feelings. This is your house. But is it your home? Hi, I'm Nelson DeMello, and join me as we try to find our home beyond our borders. I don't know, I think that's fine.
Yeah, that's a good take.
Guys, last time I said I wanted all of the smoke. Don't really know what that means though. Don't know who's it's gonna come from. I don't really know, but I do want to talk about the LGBTQ community. I'm going to be kind of in the middle of both things. Not to compare myself to Jesus, but in the same way that a lot of times when they would ask him questions, be like, are you for Caesar or for God? Are you for, are you set, like, do you believe in the resurrection or you don't? Or da 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 da. He always finds himself somewhere in between, and it pisses everybody off. I think that's what's going to happen here. So I'll start off with the Christians because, those are my people. I don't think that God's law is objective. I don't believe in objective morality. And you're like, yeah, you can believe whatever you want, but you're wrong. I would say if you look at the context of the Old Testament, the laws, commands, and statutes were for specific people. What specific people? For the Jews themselves, right? Let's say circumcision, for example. Circumcision, snip, snip. That was not something that was commanded for the whole world, right? That was commanded for God's chosen people to show that they were chosen by God, to show the uniqueness of these people from the rest of the world. I think the same is true for Christians. When you look at 1 Corinthians 5, you look at Paul giving a laundry list of evil and bad, right? And then he says, but I'm not talking about those outside in the world. I'm talking about those inside the church. Don't even sit with people like that. Who am I to judge those outside? God is to judge those outside. Like, God is going to do whatever he wants with those people outside. I can only worry about what's inside. So that gives you kind of a context, old and new, of, okay, these laws are specific for God's people that believe in him, right? And you could also just logically get to the conclusion of, well, if I don't believe in God, then what are his laws to me? That would be like, I don't know, if like Harry Potter had some rules of politeness and, like polite society, and let's say you had to nope, not raise your hand. Let's say you had to go like, blah, to say hi to someone. And you read that in a book, and then you go out in the world and do that. Everyone's going to think you're crazy. You know what I mean? And so you have to believe in the basic premise before that extends into behavior and all these things. Second thing, and so to further that analogy, the Middle East, okay, has some, for an American, some, let's say outdated, traditional, whatever you want to call them, laws, right? They're a dry country, which means no buying or selling of alcohol. Some of the countries there, they have specific rules that apply to women and, how they are treated and taken care of and this and that, all of that. Here in America, where it's the land of anarchy, no, not really, but, the land of freedom, right, where everyone can do whatever they want as long as it's consensual and it doesn't really hurt anybody. We look at that and be like, yo, that's kind of crazy. But to them, they kind of understand it, And so, again, it's that subjectivity. And their laws don't apply to us and our laws don't apply to them. We can disagree. But, they're like, at the very least, it becomes a respectful thing. Like, those people are like this. They behave like this. Their values are these. That's not for me. Not say keep the distance, but let be respectful or whatever the case is. So this is how I feel like people should look at Christianity and how Christians should look at other people, is understanding like, man, they don't believe what I believe. So why would I expect them to behave like I do or carry the same weight? Now, I'm going to challenge the LGBTQ community. I'm going to challenge you right now. Like I said, I'm just dealing with the Christians. And so I don't think this is a moral conversation. That's really what I want to get to. being gay isn't bad. And I think any Christian who says so, and they'll list it down like, look, see, da 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 da. Let me let me actually just more Bible for you. Let's go to Romans 6. Romans 6:16. Okay. It says, do you not know that if you present yourselves to anyone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one whom you obey? So a little bit of context here. Later on, he says, I'm only speaking in natural terms for you to understand, because slaves, what are slaves? Slaves do not have will, and they work, right? They work for the master, and they don't have a choice, right? Paul is making the claim that that's kind of what we are. And here, I'll continue. He says, either of sin, so you are slaves of the one who you obey, your master, either sin, which leads to death, or of obedience, which leads to righteousness. So he's saying, look, you're either a slave to sin, but sin leads to destruction, decay, right? Emptiness, or righteousness. I'm not sure. Well, I mean, we could tackle down the opposite of righteousness and the of death, because righteousness leads to salvation and whatever. But righteousness leads to life. So if we are slaves to righteousness, then we get wholesomeness, and we get fulfilled and wholesomeness and all of these things, right? So what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say that it's not that God's commands isn't this objective good or bad, and you're just sitting on this line of like, you're a bad person, you're a good person. It's more of, hey, this is a perimeter. This is the fence, okay? If you're in this fence, everything is going to align well, mind, body, spirit, right? Everything, not that it's going to go right, because because we live in a world that has pain and suffering, like that's going to happen, right? But it's unneeded, it's unnecessary suffering and pain that sometimes we go through out of our own stubbornness, right? Okay, let's put that to the side for a second. But it's this idea that if you fall out of this boundary, if you get out of this perimeter, out of this fence, and you go on into let's say there's a dark forest, right? Anything can happen. You're not under my protection, kind of deal. And so it's more about this idea. Like, hey, in here, you're protected. Out there, God knows yeah, God knows what's going to happen to you, And so that's all it is. And I say this too because this is like a very common saying, right? Like, man, if hell's where the party is, that's where I want to go. But the thing is, and I truly believe this, all the self-righteous, hateful Christians that you've ever met that you said, I want nothing to do with God because of these people. And guess what? God doesn't want anything to do with them either. And it doesn't mean that, because, we're all sensitive to the things that we hold close to us, right? We all have that. Things strike a nerve when it's too personal. And so maybe people have just not egged on, like, everyone hates the no guy, And so, especially if it holds dear to you. And someone saying no to you doesn't necessarily mean they're being hateful. And it doesn't mean it doesn't mean that they're being hateful. So there's a difference, right? Of saying, hey man, like, you do what you want, but I just need to tell you I don't agree, or whatever the case is, as opposed to, being actually, I guess in this case, homophobic and actually hateful and things like that. But obviously that's not the only form of hate. And I don't mean, racism and this and that. Sometimes there's just disdain for poor people, or never mind. I don't know. Anyways, there's just prejudice and judgment and all these things, right? What was I talking about? For the Christians listening that are like, what are you talking about? God hating his own people and this and that. Well, it says in Matthew 7:7, I think, it says, I never knew you. Get away from me. And like, a lot of young Christians deal with that, and you shouldn't. It's really more of, if you've been in the faith for 10 years and nothing's changed in your life, you really, really, really need to look at yourself, because it's and I'll get, yeah, I'll get to this. But the idea is that following God will lead to transformation, point blank, right? But we can also, we should not expect it. Like, we shouldn't expect the timing of it. We should expect the event of it, if that makes sense. It never happens on our time, right? This actually brings up another thing. I know an argument, this is really deep, guys, and I do want to, I don't want to apologize. I mean, this is what I'm here for. You know, I've talked to a lot of, gays and things of the sort, that community, and they'll say things like, well, if God loves me, why did he make it wrong for me to do this, and why did he make me this way? I can honestly say that from now from my life experiences, I think that's a selfish question, because you're looking at what God puts in someone's heart and commands against it, as if homosexuality is the only thing he's ever done that with. If I can share a story, my dad and I fought basically since I've had an opinion. So, and that's a lot later than you would expect. I was probably like 17 when I started kind of talking, sharing my feelings and things like that. And what would happen is we would just argue and argue and argue. We didn't have a good relationship. Long story short, when we started to try to bridge that gap, we were having a conversation, one step in, 1 foot in, 1 foot out kind of deal. And he asked a question I knew was going to lead to an argument, and I was trying to avoid it as much as I could. And mind you, we're fine now, right? And I was avoiding it, but he kept egging it on. He's like, no, answer the question. Answer the question, answer the question. And this is, according to my mom, because we're, about to fight. And so we argue. I answered the question. He didn't like the answer. I knew he wasn't going to like the answer. We argued. I said, okay, look, I'm done here. We're not talking anymore. And then it was awkward for about 20 minutes. I was like, hey, love you guys. I'm going to go. Cool. As soon as I left, my dad started bawling, and he's like, why did I do that? Like, I saw myself like do the thing that I didn't want to do. If I look at my personal life, it's not fair to just expose people out there, but me, myself, at the height of my death, at the height of my spiritual death, maybe I'll give me 1 second. We'll get to there. But my point is, it happens with anger. It happens with jealousy. It happens, like, homosexuality isn't the only emotion, like, only feeling, identity, like, isn't the only path that makes someone question that. Addicts, same thing, This is a part of the human experience with walking with holiness, to be honest. Like, God, if you want me to be holy, then why did you make me unholy? And I've experienced it in a lot of areas of my life, with bitterness, with lust, and all these things. So I do think it's not fair that someone would ask that. And because of that, I mean, it is self-centered to think that you're, like, that's the only issue that God has a problem with, and this and that. I mean, God has an issue with all of us. Which kind of leads me, I think the heart of the matter isn't that you're gay. Isn't that you're queer. Isn't that you're, trans, or, whatever. I think the heart of the matter is that you've had to come to a place to accept yourself that says God is a liar so that I can be right. That the world is a liar, that I can be right. And that pride, that arrogance, I think that is the heart of the matter. Because an alcoholic can say the same thing. The difference between that is we can see the damage and the destruction that alcoholism can bring. With being LGBTQ, like, You can't necessarily, right? But I will say, okay, and this is where my story comes in. My story of how I came to Jesus was, okay, so my dad's a pastor. I grew up in the church and this and that. There's lots of to-dos and this is how you behave in church and this and that. I'm like, bro, I hate this. Okay. I'm a very emotional person. I am a very impulsive person. Like I do what I want kind of deal. Or at least I used to be. And now I'm pretty disciplined now, but I had to reframe. Okay. Yeah. I'm missing the point. When I was about to go to college, I gave it all up, and I was pissed off and this and that. I went off to college. Well, I also read the Bible a lot, like for maybe 6 months or so, like a lot. Like I read the New Testament maybe like, I don't know, 20 times or something in the span of 6 months to prove to my dad that he's a dummy and he doesn't know what he's talking about and this and that. And it didn't work because, he's stubborn as heck and whatever. But I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter. I went off to college, found myself back to a church because I didn't make any friends. And I was like, that's one place where I know I can make friends. So I go back and, start hanging out with the college minister and some friends and stuff like that. College minister is just basically a pastor, but without the title. Yeah. So we get really close and I tell him, look, man, I love you guys. You guys are so sweet, so kind, so fun. I'm not going to change I'm just not going to change. Like, I am going to be who I am, but I still want to be a part of you guys and I still want to hang out. And he's like, oh, okay, that's weird that you say that. And he's like, look, and I'll be 100% honest with everything that I'm going through. I'm okay with that. If this is, my story, this is my story, and that's fine. And so it was really like, if God is real, not only am I going to meet him where I'm at, but I'm not going to change anything because I have to, or I'm forced to. And so that became my journey. And so I would go to my pastor and, almost weekly and be like, hey, I'm talking to this girl. I think she's the one. And then, a couple weeks later, we'd get too intimate and be like, oh man, I realized, no, that's not it, and that became a cycle. And, and at the height of all of it, that's so important. Let me read verse 20 for you guys. I apologize, because this is important. So again, we're talking about being slaves to sin, slaves to righteousness. And then verse 20 says, for when you are slaves of sin, you are free in regards to righteousness. But what fruit were you getting at the time from the things of which you are now ashamed? For the end of those things is death. And so what that means is I was free from self-control. I was free from, essentially self-control. Lust was my master, and I would follow its desires. I would do whatever I pleased. And the fruit was from the destructiveness that I saw from following my desires was low self-esteem, was a lot of chaos in my mind, a lot of fighting with people. It wasn't for a lack of trying, of me trying to find loopholes around the statutes of God to satisfy my flesh and be right with God, and be right with people. And that's kind of where my wisdom comes from. That's kind of where this understanding that this is what's good for you, this is what's not good for you. This is what's destructive, this is what's healing and helpful and growth and virtuous. And so that's what it became. That's what I understood it as. And it changed my, and that's why I say, I have a different relationship with discipline. I'm passionate to be disciplined because I've seen what undisciplined life looks like. And I realize it's not worth it. I think what I'm trying to also bring to the table with that story is that if you come as you are,
People might force you to start changing because you came to God. God will not force you. 6 years later, 7 years later, a long road, don't get me wrong, filled with hurt and confusion and all of these things. I'm vanilla, I guess, not out of complete desire, because sometimes I'm like, I'm thinking in the back of my head, like, this person, whatever. And I'm like, no, wait a second. That's going to hurt me. If you were to go through the book of Proverbs, it always says like that that like a harlot or a lover is going to be the end of you, and you learn that the hard way, kids. You learn that the hard way. But again, I think there is a lot of things that you have to wrestle with. Like if you want to tackle the nuances of trying to understand, okay, wait. Yeah, this is another issue I've seen. I'm not saying that you have it or whatever, but the actual wrestle of, I know this isn't biologically what I'm supposed to be, right? Because, no offense or anything, but you can't reproduce. And that like biologically animals are supposed to reproduce, to keep populations going and things like that. But then, there's ways around it. I'm not, whatever, but it's that thing of, okay, I know that deep down, actually, like, this isn't natural. It's common, it's fine, it's whatever, it's not a judgment thing here. But then there's also that sense that, again, I am who I am. How do I reconcile these things? And I think in reconciling, you just have to throw away a lot of truth. Wait, hold up. If at any point in this you said, hey, I never thought about it like that, please subscribe. What are you doing, man? I'm trying to pay my bills. Okay, anyways, let's get back to the serious stuff. All right, see it. My favorite story is of this situation. There is this transgender man that marries a gay man. And somewhere along the lines, I think they're having marital problems or something, and they try church. I don't know all the details, but they're on Lecrae's podcast. I think they made their rounds. They're really awesome people. I love how they tell their story, because it's a story of progression and a slow thing. So they came in wanting help with their marriage, and they got it. They found a church that at least accepted them, and that's hard enough as it is. And there's churches that, so there are churches, and this is a sad thing, there aren't enough churches that accept. Okay, in those churches that accept, not a lot of them have patience to deal with sinners. Like me, I was so blessed to have people that was just like, hey, he's who he is. He might be this way forever. I still need to love this person persistently and constantly. That hopefully, it registers in his head how much God loves him and God wants more for him and things like that. But with this group, or with this couple, it was the same thing. And so they came in for marital problems, anger started coming up. And so they started dealing with that. Unforgiveness, they started dealing with that. And they started seeing the miracle of God working in their lives, giving up, their hatred for people, giving up, maybe their bad financial habits or whatever the case is. And finally, after years, God said, hey, let's speak about your identity to the trans man. Like, and he saw so much good that God has done, that he finally trusted God with that even. And it was a lot of tears, and it was a lot of fighting and wrestling and praying with God. But finally, he detransitioned, I should say. And at the same time, because that gay man was with this transgender man and fell in love with his heart, it didn't matter whether his lover was a guy or a girl anymore. And so, because he saw the femininity, he saw all these things, these characteristics in this person,
And so, in a roundabout way, in a crazy way, God redeemed them both. And they're together now. And yes, they talk about it. Like, yeah, they still have, habits and having to learn how to, relearn the dynamic of what it is to be man and wife. But I love that story because, again, God touched on all of these other parts of their lives before they got to touch on sexuality and these things. Because God, that's not like the priority. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much more that God can offer. And I know that's a big deal to a lot of people, and that's why it's priority in these things. Yeah, I guess another thing is like, is all you are your sexuality? Like, just all the way back, is that all you are? I remember when I was going through, my whole phase, I say that just like that's all it was. It was way deeper than that. But that's all I was. All I was were gonads that had needs that needed to be met. That's all I was. That's all I thought about. It was a time where I thought I was conscious of what I was doing and feeling, but I was really, again, being a slave to sin. I couldn't say no, and I didn't see any other way. I didn't see any other way to see the world. And I think maybe might also be a huge part of it is I can't see beyond. It's like obese people that had obese parents and have obese friends and this is that, or, skinny, it doesn't matter, but they've never seen the transformation for them to believe I can do that too. Because you need a concept, you need a vision of what that can look like for you to chase after it. And that's the story of Abraham. That's this, of going to the promised land, going to a land that I will show you. It's like, what the heck is that? What do you mean? Like, where am I going? What am I, and that becomes our journey. That's our faith. God is just there for you, he's there and he has open arms and he wants to be with you. And don't let something like this get in the way of that. You could even tell him and I think being open in communication, right? Saying, I want God. I don't think I'm ready to give this up yet. Or I want God. I want to be close to Jesus, but I'm not ready to give this up. A mature Christian would look at that and say, yeah, okay. Because a mature Christian would understand that because they had the same thing. Maybe it wasn't their sexuality, but maybe it was their money. Maybe it was their job. Maybe it was their children. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was unforgiveness. Like I said, with my dad only in the last 5 years, he's been a Christian since he was 18. He's almost 50 now. It was only in the last 5 years did he forgive his mom. And he said, I've never been so free. I've never been so light. And And because I guess we gave everything up at the same time, And when the Bible talks about this freedom that you can have in Christ and all this and that, you think, how can that be? What freedom can you really have when you've become a slave to him? When you don't realize that you're a slave to your own ambitions, you're slave to material things that own you. That's ridiculous. How can something inanimate own you? And how can a part of you define all of you? I just want this conversation to get started. And maybe I didn't piss everyone off. Maybe I did. I don't know. But that idea that homosexuality isn't wrong. The debate, I think, would be better. Is it destructive? Is it useful? And again, I'm not saying that that's a clear answer either. Because I think of one friend of mine. I think you can only realize that you're a slave to something when you're losing. It's like you don't know if you have a gambling problem until you've lost everything and you're still trying to win it back. You know what I mean? But if you're just winning and then you leave the table, it's like, I don't have a problem. And that's how I came. Again,
this perimeter of this is destructive, this is destructive. Me always either being heartbroken, breaking other people's hearts, getting into situations where I'm losing my mind, pregnancy scares, STD scares, like all of these scares. And I'm like, this is like, I don't have peace of mind. And I also think that people understand this, even in the LGBTQ community, in the community, because I know that abstinence is something that is practiced amongst some of them, right? Like, hey, I'm just going to take a year off, focus on myself. I've heard this come out of people's mouths, and I'm like, that's so interesting. Like, are you religious? Da-da-da. No, I just need to back off a little bit. I need to understand myself. And da-da-da. I'm like, what? And this is like when I'm in the height of it, right? Like, let me just get real deep into it. So, you don't have to let your creativity go. There was this app called Yellow at the time. I think it's Yellow now. I don't know, whatever. It was like a Tinder for Snapchats. If you matched, you would get each other's Snapchats. And I put my my range to like 10,000 miles, right? So like all of Florida, all of America, I was matching with, even some people from the UK and stuff like that. And so that is how I had, for lack of better words, hoes in different area codes. You know what I'm saying? At the time, I don't know if I mean, I think I'm handsome, but at the time, I was, let's say, pretty cute. So, I had that going for me. I was a decent human being, so that had that going for me too. I was interested in people, listened, and that was just like my whole shtick. I would listen, be like, oh my gosh, I can talk to you, and then I'm like, yeah. You know what I mean? If you're not watching me on YouTube, I'm doing hand signs and motions. But it was that, between that and having to relieve myself of my duties 4 times a day at the minimum, I was a mess, and in all of that, I was just losing myself. I felt it, and there were times where I couldn't stop myself. Like I wanted to stop and I couldn't. And I think just that destructiveness, in the middle of that, there were people saying, oh, I want to be abstinent. And I'm like, for what? And I didn't realize how poisoning that was in my heart, in my life, how much anxiety, because the world then becomes not only transactional, but it becomes transactional of like the oh my gosh, the currency is now attention, right? If I have a lot of attention from a lot of people, then I'm good. Then everything's okay. If I had no attention, then I was worthless. For that reason, I joke around a lot, but I think I was not bred. I shouldn't say bred. I was going down a path that if I continued on, I probably would have been a porn star, to be honest. Maybe I should cut that out. I don't know, but I was close. There was times that I was very close. I had opportunity. That's not a story for. I mean, shoot, I don't know. But yes, that would have been. Isn't that funny? Like look at me. Where am I? You know what I'm saying? Preaching the Lord to the gays. Amen. Wow. But sorry, I don't even know. Yeah, okay. Going through what I've gone through and having the mind to understand what I have gone through, like the events in my life and the desires might be specific to my life, but if I branch that out and I try to understand like the core meaning, the core understanding, this can affect a lot of people. Like this can, and that's kind of just how my brain works. And so when I look at my sexuality, I think about gays and, etc. And that is the case. I think there's more to be told. I mean, if specific people are listening, and I mean parents, there's a lot that they don't know, and I don't know how much they would be like, oh my God, this is my son, But it's all testimony, it's all like the miraculous workings of Christ in my life, again, that I did not have any effort to do. If you don't believe that, read Ephesians 2. You can read Galatians 3. These are scriptures that talk about how God does all of the work inside of you as we pursue Christ. Our faith in him allows him to give us a grace to change and to pick something new and pick something different, right? Einstein says that insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. I think that's the life of a sinner. But God gives us a different choice to do a different thing to get a different result. And I just kind of want to leave you with that. I wasn't going to pray because this is more evangelistic and this, and like, I want to be kind of respectful wherever you are. But in the case that you listened to this, maybe all the way through, and said, I don't know anything about this, but your God doesn't sound so hateful, which is the point, because at the end of the day, he's not hateful, and people are hateful and represent God, but God himself is not hateful. He's vengeful. He's wrathful. Don't get me wrong, but he's not hateful. It's not in his nature to be hateful, and he cannot deny himself. That is also in the Bible. Fun fact, like, preachers would say, if one person came to Christ, the death of Jesus was sufficient. I would argue, honestly, that if no one came to Christ, Jesus would have still died on the cross, because he cannot deny who he is. And he's love. True love. Not our idea of love. Our idea of love is distorted. It's transactional. It's needy. It's selfish, right? Real love. Sacrificial love. Selfless, self-giving love, where the other person becomes more important. This is who God is. And so I will pray. God, thank you so much for just your grace and your love, God. Thank you for those who might have taken a step closer to you, God. Maybe not all the way, but just a little bit closer. God, I pray that you can put people in their lives that can accept them for who they are, that can be patient with them, that can be gracious with them, that can love them, God. I pray that you put real children of God, real men and women of God in their lives to do your work, God, to teach and to grow and to be loving and kind, God, because that's what we all need, God. And there is a community larger than the community that just wants to be raw and real and wants to move not at their own pace, but not to be forced to do anything they don't want to do. And I pray that there's a Christian community for each and every one of them that can be patient enough to let them move at the pace they need to, God. I also pray that you challenge them in love, challenge them in wisdom, challenge them with whatever is going on in their lives, God. I pray all of this in your name. Amen. Hey guys, thank you so much for going on this journey with me. If you like the content, please like, subscribe, follow, and remember, there is more to life, and that is good news. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.